Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christeen. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It is a Monday. And, doing a podcast on the Monday is kind of a fun thing to do. So I'm okay with it being a Monday today.
It's a great way to kick off the week. And I think today's podcast, it's a little bit of a fun one. We're going to have a little fun with it. It's one I was thinking about after talking to some people over the last couple months, after reading some posts on Facebook and on even Twitter and Instagram. And I was like, oh, wow. And after going to a trade show, and I was like, oh, that guy's back again. And so I'm looking forward to today's podcast.
And who is that guy, Steve? Who's this guy?
That guy, we all know the guy. He shows up, I call it know-it-all Joe, know-it-all Larry. The guy, he's at every trade show. He's going to argue with the speaker. He's on Facebook. He is telling everybody how they're wrong. They're stupid. They don't know anything. They have the wrong color mower. They're using the wrong truck. We have a guy that was at one of the trade shows, and they were going over how you can't price every job by the square foot because there's variances, front yard, backyard, slopes, grades. And this guy was so mad. He left the talk. He was so furious. He was arguing with the presenter. And I think this was the third or fourth show over a 20-year period that I've seen him get in arguments with the presenter at these shows.
Interesting. So they have all the answers, but nobody else's answers serve their content that they want to share.
Yeah, they are the answer guys, and so the reason I want to bring this up is because they're dangerous, right? Because a lot of younger people in this industry, in this business, sometimes they really think that these guys may be right because they're so adamant about it and they're so convincing about it. And what's interesting is they're all opinion, and they very rarely have any kind of facts or information to back it up. And they're never asking any questions, right? They're always just saying how everyone else is wrong. And frequently they're not even presenting how they're right. They're just right. And it could be, like I said, from the how everyone has the wrong trucks. Only their trucks are the right kind. Only their mowers are the right colors. It could even be string trimmer line. Only they have the right string trimmer line. They only have the right gas cans. It can be everything how everybody else is wrong. And what's interesting is they're never the most successful guy in their market. They're never the most successful guy in the industry. So Christeen, we were talking a little bit about this. So what's behind this guy? What's driving this guy?
Yeah. So typically, and anybody who listens to this podcast or knows me is I read a lot, and I absolutely love, the psychology behind human behavior. It fascinates me. It's one of the things besides strategy that I love to kind of geek out on. So, when this subject came up, and it's come up before in conversations, and not only with clients, but with professional associates as well, to where we're kind of look at each other across the table of like, oh, okay, this guy is sitting at our table, here we go. This is going to be fun. So the interesting thing is when somebody has a narrative like this, it is serving something for them, right? And one of the things I realized is it's not about me. It has nothing to do, I'm just kind of like a person, a pawn in the game, right? In their game that's serving their narrative. And what this typically will come from is it stems from insecurity. It will stem from this deep-seated need for validation. And also it can be a coping mechanism too, to where they want to go to these events or they want to be there, but maybe they feel like they don't belong, or they're experiencing a little bit of social stress or anxiety, so they'll, instead of, kind of being quiet and withdrawn like most people are in a new situation or in a situation where they're uncomfortable, their mouth kind of takes over and they just start having all the answers. And then depending on how the reaction, kind of comes across, where some people might be interested because they are truly there in that situation to learn. And others, might just kind of like acknowledge and nod their head, kind of bob along and yeah, uh-huh. And that kind of feeds the person too. So any sort of acknowledgement. And I also had discovered, and this was interesting, it's from a TED Talk that Michael Bungay Stanner shares. And he's talking about, our advice monster, where we like to tell. And he says that when we tell, and we tell and tell and tell, and we don't intently listen to somebody, it gives us, we have this answer. And that answer kind of, makes us feel good to have the answer. So that could be the other side of it, to where it just really feeds them to have the answer, and it kind of gives them a rush, so it can be addicting for some people and personalities.
To be the answer guy, right? It does feel good. It feels good to help other people out if they have the answers, right? If you can help them with their questions. And then, so that's one part of it. And it can be a little bit irritating if you are around certain people that have the answer to everything, even the problems that you're not asking to be solved. So just be careful if you hear these guys. I remember one post on Facebook, someone asked, what should my next mower be? And I just was so curious about what everyone asked. I think there was about 80 different comments of what the guy's next mower should be. And but no one had asked, what mowers are you using now? What size lawns do you mow? What dealers are near you to help service those mowers? It was just, they just listed all the things. So, we really want to be careful if people are just giving us advice or input without asking any kinds of questions. So I had to ask the questions, right? What mowers do you have now? What works best for you? What size lawns do you have? And so after I asked some questions, he answered me. He's like, oh, geez, that's really helpful. So some people had a comment on the questions, like that was almost know-it-all-y. So, so you have to be very careful. So the challenge with that is the know-it-alls on these Facebook forums or any of these forums are people stop answering or stop posting questions because they don't want to be berated. I've stopped posting photos and stuff on some of these forums because I would post photos of my fertilizer, my truck. And, we have a large company. I would post a photo of my trucks and I would be like, all these, your trucks are stupid. Oh, granular fertilizer. I would never do that. My back hurts like that, and I net more than these guys gross in a year, right? I mean, so here's a company netting more than they gross in a year. I have my truck. One truck does what they do. We do in a day what they do in a month. Some of these guys who are commenting on this, and that's fine. They can comment. I was just sharing, but they don't ever ask me a question. They don't ask a question in the comment. They're just letting me know how stupid my truck is and how stupid my fertilizer is. So it's like, then it makes me not want to post or help other people. So it's very interesting. So it goes back to, like you were saying, like maybe they feel insecure, and I'm not doing it to brag or anything. I'm trying to help other people. But then I'm like, oh, wow, it makes me feel like crap because why are they on me for that? But it makes me want not to do that. So then I stop helping people. But it goes back to them being insecure and all that, right?
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with you, right? You're posting things that are helpful, that other people might want to engage in and talk about, that maybe that's their next step in their business of, oh, I'm trying to get a good idea of how I want my trucks to look, or, what are other people doing in this industry when it comes to application? And so posting is helpful, but when you have that person who shows up and they're critical about it and they're not helpful, then, it's that right there is a perfect example of it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them and how they're feeling, what they're thinking, whatever it is that they're going through, it's their narrative. It's not yours. And I would agree. It is not helpful to the other people who are there to learn and engage with each other. I have been in situations where someone shows up and it's like always this, consistent person. They show up, they have all the answers, they talk over people. And I'm at the point now where it's like I see them coming and I turn the other way and I'm like, oh, I suddenly have something or somewhere to be, like, all right, I'll see you guys later. And I avoid them. But it is very, I think, exhausting, at least for me, to have any sort of engagement. And it does make me want to not say something or not participate in the group activity when this person is there.
And, I have learned a tremendous amount from companies who are a quarter of my size, half my size, a third, 3 times my size. Companies that are much larger than me, when they post stuff, I'm friends with them on Facebook. I have conversations with them. I want to learn more about why are they doing that, right? But that is it's to my advantage, right? That's why I visited 50 different companies all over the country. There's a lot of curiosity. I've had long conversations with people that have 2-person companies, and they share innovations that they've had. So I've learned just as much from a 2-person company as from a 200-person company. So you can have curiosity at all different levels. It doesn't have to be from a big company. It can be from a very small, innovative company that are living, their goals and their dreams at their company. So, it's really more about being a curious learner and a curious leader that really helps us live our life and our business. So, just be careful. Don't let social media, don't let these know-it-alls, beat us down, stop us from sharing, and stop us from learning in the industry. And so that's kind of what today's message is. If you've been through this, I really would encourage you to keep going and showing up and keep posting. And we have different trade shows and different opportunities in the industry. The GIE is coming up in the fall, and you see and meet a lot of these know-it-all Larrys and Joes there, but also you'll meet a lot of great people there who, I've been in the industry for a long time. And I think one of the great things, I meet with a group of very successful lawn care business owners every Friday, and they've been in the industry for a long time. And it's just a whole bunch of idea sharing, and it's nothing but curiosity. So if you don't have a group of people you're meeting with on a regular basis, to share ideas and get support, I would definitely recommend that you find a group of people that you can do that with.
Yeah, and I think one of the points that you brought up, Steve, that I kind of want to circle back to, because I think this is so important, that lack of curiosity, that isn't showing up in the conversation, or that person who shows up and they kind of take up all the space and they're like, this is wrong, that's wrong, you should do this, you should do that, whatever it is. I kind of want to talk about the person, who it's harming, right? Because it's serving this guy, but it can harm someone. And we have worked with so many small business owners, and we hear from them, like we're meeting them where they're at. We're figuring out, like, what are your challenges? What's going on? Okay, tell me, why do you do it that way? How does that work in your company? Have you tested out any other ways? What is this? And a lot of the things that we find is they're doing it that way because somebody told them that was the best way to do it. And we have found it's not the best way to do it for them, because one, it's not their market, it's not their business model, it's not how they serve, provide their services, things like that.
I had Steve with Green Profit Academy. I was just reading a Harvard Business Review study that showed people who have written down goals and plans make 10 times more money over a 10-year period than people who don't write their goals and plans down. And really, that's why I'm so excited to announce the Green Profit Academy Mind Your Own Business Retreat. This is going to be the third retreat we're putting on. It's going to be held in Granville, Tennessee at the Wildwood Resort and Marina. It's going to be on November 4th to November 8th. And we're going to work on not only your 1 year, but your 1 to 5 year business plan and goals. So you're going to be so far ahead of people who don't have written down goals and plans. We are doing this because we want your business to be far more successful than you ever imagined. And it all starts with goals and plans. So join us this year, November 4th to November 8th, for the Mind Your Own Business Retreat. Let's see. Come on, sign up. I'm going to put the link to sign up in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there. It's time to get serious about your business. Now's the time to start. Yeah, and that's a huge issue because, as we work with people at Green Profit Academy, I just had a meeting on Friday with one of our coaching clients, and, he's trying to build his company around somebody else's business model. And when I aligned him to his business model to meet his goals, he was like, I could feel the light bulb go off. And he was in Wyoming, right? He's like, oh, he thought he had to he's in irrigation. He thought he had to do irrigation and mowing and landscaping. And I'm like, no, what are you really good at? What do you like doing? What's your highest gross profit margin? And it's the install in the irrigation. So that's the business model we're going to focus on. Mm-hmm. And he was so relieved that was going to be his model, which is where his natural talents and skills lined up. So, developing your own business model that matches up with your own talents and skills, and also with your market and, where you are, your life stage also. And so you have to develop your own model. And that's why, having people that can support you around that and identify it and help you align it is really key.
Yeah. And I think that, and even in my experience, when we don't know, there is a lack of certainty to where we're like, oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Or, oh, if I communicate that, I might look stupid because I am doing it this way, or this is my belief, so I want to defend it. So if we don't know if we're 100% right, it's very rare that we'll actually speak up and share, that opinion or where we're at. And it's especially very hard when you're in a situation with somebody who is that know-it-all and kind of taking up all, I say take up all the air in the room, right? Nobody else can breathe. So I think that this is a good point to really give ourselves permission to, one, be curious, and then two, have confidence in what we're doing, but be open for positive feedback and, change, whatever that might be. So in those situations, I think it's good to where it's like the guy that you were talking about here, he was like, oh, well, I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to do that. And it's like, well, no, you don't have to be all those things. And, learning about that, like, why do you feel you need to be all those things? Tell me more about that. Is there a goal that you have or something you're trying to accomplish? And we've even worked with business owners to where somebody told them, they're a lawn application company, and they say, oh, you really, to increase your revenue, you need to add pest control. And where did that come from? It's like, without knowing their numbers, without knowing their market, do they know how they're going to leverage that opportunity? Is it really going to serve the business? There's all these questions. So it's very easy to throw your opinion out there to some of these business owners. But it's very dangerous, like you said, because what if that guy did add pest control? What would it have cost his business? Like, we know what it would have cost his business.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. When you're listening to people or you're taking advice from someone that doesn't know your P&L, right? Your profit and loss. They're not familiar with your balance sheet. They're not familiar with your cash flow, right? They're not familiar with your goals. They're not familiar with like what your lifestyle congruency is. And all that has to make sense and all has to come together to come up with a strategic plan. right? And it has to be a 5-year strategic plan. So if they don't have all the information, they could be giving you the best advice or the worst advice based on where you are in your life cycle, right? Whether you're 30 or 60, whether your balance sheet is X or Y, right? So you have to take all that into consideration when you are coming up with your 5-year strategic plan. So what's best for a 30-year-old is not best for a 60-year-old and vice versa. So all of that depending on, and that's where the curiosity comes into play. So if you're posting, be careful the questions that we ask, right? And who we're asking it to. So I guess getting back to asking questions on Facebook, if we're asking questions on Facebook, I guess we deserve the answers that we're getting, right? Now I'm just posting pictures like, hey, this is what we're using. This is what we're doing, just to share that. But I guess I'm deserving my comments. But I wasn't really asking for advice, but I guess I'm deserving the comments that I'm getting either way. But be very careful of what advice that you're accepting from people if they don't have the whole picture. And that goes for even family, right? And family can be either jealous or they can think that they're giving you the advice based on other people. And also business models are very dangerous because we think that we either have to be a 3-ring circus or we have to do that mowing and the irrigation and landscape, or we can be that one-trick pony where we're just going to do irrigation or we're just going to do lawn spraying or just pest control. But, you have to do the business model that works for you, again, based on your balance sheet, your P&L, and your cash flow and the capital resources you have available. So there's a lot that goes into this other than just winging it. Now, the challenge with just winging it is once you start making mistakes, unpacking that or backpedaling it and fixing it can take years.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely can. And that's why I think, people post questions because they don't know, but they really want to know, so I think it depends on the group that you're in. Like, am I going to post questions, right? Is it the right group to post questions in? Do you see the level of expertise there that can support you in finding those answers, right? And I don't know if it's so much about deserving responses that we get on social media. I feel like it's more about being prepared. If you are going to post questions or you're going to share something, be prepared for what you're going to get back, because if you're posting something, you might have expectations tied to that. And if you get criticism, I'm sure criticism isn't in your list of expectations when you post like, hey, I'm going to share, my truck and my mower in this forum. And you're not sitting there going, oh, I expect to get criticized or somebody to come in and, talk some smack to me in this forum. You're expecting to get some sort of engagement. You're like, oh, maybe someone will like my truck. Maybe I'll help someone or they'll learn or they'll be curious and ask me questions. So I would say adjusting the expectations around what you're going to get and then being ready, right? Some of us are really great when it comes to communication and we kind of have these natural skills that show up to where we could just kind of fire away with the response. Others, it takes a little bit to get there. I have people in my life that don't have great communication skills, and I kind of have to give them space to think and talk with me or about things.
Yes, they need time, right? Especially if their natural talents are deliberative and disciplined, right? Analytical. They need more time and space to think and process and then contribute. Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a long topic. It's very interesting now that I'm thinking more about this, like who are the people that show up to these events? And yeah, I've been in this industry for 40 years. The most successful people I know are these lifelong learners. They're always curious. And the other thing that's interesting is they have the people that build bigger teams or larger teams are usually more curious and they're willing to try and fail people. So they're okay with being wrong. That's one of the conversations I've had with people who have built larger organizations. They're like, I'm fine with failing. I just move on. I learn and I move on, or we learn and we move on. We find out what doesn't work and we're like, okay, that didn't work. Now we know it doesn't work. Let's move on. And I think the know-it-all people really struggle with that, like the failing part. And they've, and we just had a recent podcast about that. Like, okay, moving past what didn't work, our failures, accepting that and using that as a launching pad and learning and moving on. And that's one of the other things. So I think being willing to learn and fail and move on is one of the attributes of a curious leader and learner that these know-it-alls they don't have. They don't ever want to be seen as wrong. So that's another thing that you'll see, or at least you won't see them admit it, right?
Yeah. They definitely won't admit it, and they'll typically have kind of some comment in the chamber to throw out there if you do challenge their perspective. So I typically will not engage with those types of people. I have kind of, some of my own preloaded responses, which is a healthy way to live, right? Is in situations that you don't enjoy or create stress or anxiety for you, is to have some set responses or some set behaviors that you can kind of default to where you don't have to think in that moment of stress or like, oh, what is going on here? So some of the things, I'll say is like, oh, well, I appreciate your input. Like, thank you for sharing that with me. Another thing I'll, say, I'll consider that. Thanks for that, whatever topic it is, I will consider that. That's an interesting point. And I'll kind of nod my head. Some of the things that you can do, and it's funny because my best friend is really good at this. She's in HR and she will change course in the conversation. She's really good at like someone's heading down, this road on this topic or whatever it is, or they're kind of getting on a rant. And she's really good at just like taking a sharp, left. She's like, here we go. So, that's an interesting point. Well, have you considered X, Y, and Z? So you can quickly change or redirect the conversation. Yeah, well, I hear that you really like that color of a mower. What do you think of grass seed? Or, yeah, I'm not really in the market for mowing right now. So you can easily redirect the conversation or even kind of invite yourself to leave. Well, it was great meeting you. Thanks for, sharing that information. I've got to go check out, whatever this booth over here or meet my associate or whatever it is and just kind of, invite yourself to leave, which is absolutely okay to do.
So, and so that brought up something that's very interesting. So the need to belong, right? So a lot of people are either Chevy, Ford, Dodge, whatever, Skag, Toro, Exmark, whatever the brand is, that need to belong. So that belonging clue, right? John Deere, they need to belong to something. So when they join that brand, it's very polarizing to them that they belong to something. Yeah. And and they'll defend it, right? So that's an interesting concept of they're going to stay in this camp. And if you're not in that camp with them, then you were wrong. And that's another thing that they have their people that they can be with. And so if you're not their people, then you're wrong. Well, almost an enemy even, which is another interesting concept of psychology. So that's another different thing. And I've seen long drawn out, posts and arguments back and forth just on that type of brand. Like, don't even talk to me if you drive a different truck than I drive. Don't even come over to me. I've seen arguments about how to sharpen mower blades, or how many mower blades to run. Like you run a crisscross double set of mower blades, this is, if you don't do that, don't even talk to me. Just that, like we have to be in this camp or that camp. And that's a whole nother set of psychological issues for people. So it's very interesting. And there's one of the things that I've found, especially coaching people over the years. And we see this in the Olympics, right? People have different styles of doing things, even to win gold medals, right? And silvers and any kind of medals, right? So when I teach this in sales, right? What's the best close, right? The best way to close a sale. And people are like, whoa, it's the Ben Franklin, or it's the assumption close. Oh, it's the quick close. It's this close and that close. I'm like, well, the best close in sales is the one that works for you, right? So the mower that works the best for you is the one. This ride-on spreader sprayer that works for you is the best one. So all the tools, the truck that works for you is the best one. And that's always what it is, right? So that's how everything is. And regardless of where we are, the one that works the best for you, the business model, right? How you charge, how the types of clients, like some people like working with this type of client and that type of client. That's the best one that works for you. So, you have to go with what works for you, and that's the best. That's what we find is the best. We like to work with a very particular type of client. Other people like to work with different types of clients. So that's their best client. So that's really, you have to find out what works for you and your talents and themes, and then stick in that lane.
Yeah. And I think too is to remember you have a choice, right? You have the choice to engage with this person or not engage with them. You have the choice to have the conversation. You have a choice to respond. You have a choice to listen to them, and I usually choose none of the above. And because it's, I'm not going to change them. They're not going to start showing up differently because of something I say. It's, they have been dying on this hill for a very long time. So, it's who am I to convince them to stop dying on that hill? So it's obviously serving something for them. So I'll typically, my thought is, that's interesting. I wonder what that's serving. Or I think, what problem are they trying to solve? And, and that's as far as I go. But those are my internal questions I ask myself. And then I'll use kind of some of the techniques like, well, thanks for sharing. It was good to meet you. That's interesting. I'll consider it. See you later.
That is good advice. Yes, because you're not going to change their mind about too much. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So, and I think that's the thing too, is when we don't respond, we choose not to respond or engage. It doesn't fuel the fire. These types of personalities, they really want that fuel. They're looking for it. That's why they're putting it on social media. They're putting it out there, where people are actually sincerely asking questions that can help them because they don't know and they want to know, or they're looking for some sort of support because they value the people in the forum or the groups that do have experience above and beyond theirs. So, it's really not fair in my perspective for these types of people to show up and take up all the space. But if we don't engage with them and we engage with others in the conversation, that fire is going to go out pretty quick.
Yes. And, I've seen where the speakers ask them to hold their questions, any more questions till after, and because they're disrupting the whole talk. But, I've also been outside of talks with these know-it-alls, and they can be very nice, very engaging, but they don't know how to behave in public sometimes and when to stop asking questions or even arguing. So whatever that fed, they've probably been doing it since they were little kids. I would almost bet on it. So, well, that's today's podcast. If you the next time you run into a know-it-all, you'll know what to do, and don't let them influence you too much. You live your life and run your business. And thank you for joining us on today's podcast. And we look forward to you joining us on the next podcast. Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.